Hi, I'm Miranda Cosgrove, and this is Mission Unstoppable. Coming up, this science is child's play.
This park will make science accessible to our community and inspire curiosity.
And you're about to learn all about learning.
We're learning, adapting, and growing all the time.
Then discover what happens if the Earth stops spinning. I'm gonna spill the STEM tea! And we couldn't send Fig to space, so we tried the next best thing. Mission Unstoppable! Get ready to meet the scientists, inventors, and heroes who help make our world a better place. The future is here. The Mission Unstoppable. I technically didn't have anything to do with the science in this first segment, but I'm here in the studio, so I'm calling it a collab. Check it out.
Parks help us relax, spend time with friends and family, and enjoy nature, which is great. No, really, it is. But what if you could do all that and learn about science? In Louisville, Kentucky, the local community is making that happen with the opening of the Science Playport. Designed to encourage hands-on education, the Playport is a joint initiative of the Kentucky Science Center and Louisville's expansive waterfront park. Today, we're meeting two of the Science Center's STEM communicators, Megan Sleeper, the off-site programmer, and Mira Johnson, the director of education.
What I love about my job is I get to talk about physics and chemistry, weaving and ceramics. So I'm super proud to be able to contribute that to the community around here.
I hope the work we do provides a seed of inspiration. It gets someone to stop and think, hey, that's pretty cool.
Inspired by Louisville's rich industrial history of shipping, mining, and construction, the Playport uses outdoor fun to teach science fundamentals, a mission shared by the Turf Mutt Foundation, the sponsor of this segment.
Welcome to Playport!
The Playport is just a part of the Kentucky Science Center's commitment to bring science directly to kids, with communicators like Megan sharing science education across the state and beyond.
So STEM communication is all about taking big concepts that seem inaccessible and boiling them down to the basics that affect people's everyday lives. At the Science Center, some of the main ways that we do science communication are using small-scale models and hands-on experimentation. I'm going to teach you about weight distribution using this paper cup. We can assume that if I step on this paper cup, it is going to crush. And look at that, it did. But could we get just a few more paper cups to hold my entire body weight? Adding extra cups means that each cup only has to support a little bit of my weight.
The most important difference is that I space these cups out far apart from each other, and I add something like this board
that distributes my weight across them. And now, 5 little paper cups can hold a full-grown science communicator. Let's take this experiment to the next level. This flimsy cardboard will be our second layer.
So I'm adding 5 more paper cups.
And hopefully, the science will hold my weight on 2 layers of cups. And this is the tower that science built.
This kind of hands-on science education is in every exhibit at the Playport. Kids experiment with physics fundamentals like gravity, force, motion, and simple machines.
Pull!
Educational signs throughout the playground explain the scientific concepts behind these structures.
A slide like this is an example of an inclined plane. It's a simple machine that helps us move heavy weights from high positions to low positions, or vice versa. This is a pulley system attached to a screw.
This helps move buoys from the river back onto the ship. These tires are from local construction equipment.
This dump truck is from a real construction site in Kentucky. Dump trucks and other machines like roller coasters use momentum to move very heavy things with very little energy.
This is an example of a wheel and axle. Turbines like this are used to generate energy and to propel boats forward.
Louisville's local community is propelled forward by projects like this. And hopefully, Playport inspires other cities to follow their lead.
By providing this kind of venue, it allows people to come together, socialize, teach, and engage with one another.
I love that kids can come here and have fun and learn at the same time.
I'm so energized at seeing all the hard work and all the collaboration pay off.
Our hope is that this park will make science accessible to our community and inspire curiosity.
It could take a lifetime to explore how the human mind processes learning. But we gave Dr. Brain 4 minutes. Let's see how she does. Go.
Our brains evolved to help us learn and memorize information. Like, tigers are dangerous. The best berry bush is over that hill. My sister's birthday is tomorrow. And Miranda Cosgrove's cat's name is Lucy. Hi, I'm Dr. Brain. Okay, my real name is Crystal Dillworth, but I have a Ph.D. in neuroscience, which is easier to call me Dr. Brain. So, I'm Dr. Brain! One of the best things about being human is that we're learning, adapting, and growing all the time. We can learn through a transfer of knowledge, someone telling us something. Crystal, tigers are dangerous. Cool. Or we can learn through something that we experience ourselves. Ooh, kitty! But in order to learn, it's not enough to know. We also have to remember and retain that memory over time. When we learn, information and experience creates new patterns of connections between the cells in our brain. These changes hold or code a representation of the information, and if it's important or novel enough, it might get stored away in our memories. The ability of our brains to adapt and change like this is called neuroplasticity. Now, I hope you all remember that our brains are made up of collections of cells called neurons that are grouped together by similar functions. And they're connected to each other by long cable-like projections called axons that transmit signals from the cell body of one neuron to the dendrites of another. Not every neuron in our brain is connected to every other one. And we say brains are changeable like plastic because, to a point, the interconnectedness between cells can change and adapt over time. Studies show that when we hold new information in short-term working memory, the prefrontal cortex activates in spurts to hold that pattern so that we can access it. Without this activity, the information we're trying to remember disappears in seconds. It's like when we try to remember someone's name that we've just met. Isn't that right, Leslie?
It's Lexi.
Sure. To keep the information in our head, we need to convert that information into a memory. And that happens with the help of a region in the middle of our brain with a great name, the hippocampus. No, it's not a place where a hippopotamus gets a graduate degree. It's part of your temporal lobe. Along with parts of the cerebral cortex, the hippocampus works to create declarative memories of facts and events, and also some spatial memories. Patients that have damage to their hippocampus find it difficult to remember things that happened to them recently, like what they ate for lunch, but they have no problem remembering the name of their very first pet. That's because learning and long-term memory storage happens across many different parts of our brain. It involves networks of brain regions. So, engaging as many parts of the brain as possible when we learn is a good way to improve the strength of the connections we're making. For instance, parts of the brain that coordinate emotion and movement, like the amygdala and cerebellum, get involved when our memories are emotional or related to a specific behavior. And this can help us learn and remember. Like, touching a hot stove is a painful way to learn not to do that again. The neuroplasticity of our brains allows us to learn and gives us the chance to keep thinking, doing, and being better every day. By learning something new, you're actually physically changing your brain. It's like exercising, except you don't have to worry about someone's sweat on the weight machine. So, let's test your memory. What is the name of Miranda's cat? I'll wait. Nope, it's not Snowball. It's Lucy. Bye.
Ever wish you could stop the world from spinning to hold on to a precious moment with someone you love forever? That's very selfish and dangerous. We need the Earth to spin, or else this happens. I'm gonna spill the stem tea! happen if the Earth stops spinning? Turns out, lots and lots of stuff, and it's all bad. Right now, the Earth is spinning really, really fast. We don't notice since we're moving along with it, but at the equator, you're moving east around 1,000 miles an hour. Objects in motion will remain in motion unless acted on by an outside force. So if the Earth suddenly stopped spinning, every person, rock, building, car, and piece of dirt would keep moving at 1,000 miles an hour. Now, we won't launch into space, since escape velocity needed to do that would be over 20,000 miles an hour. But we would still be in for a pretty bad time. I'm no doctor, but there's no way being catapulted that fast is good for your health. And you know what else would be traveling at 1,000 miles an hour? All the water in the oceans and the air in the atmosphere, which means sudden winds 5 times faster than a tornado, enough to destroy cities, forests, and mountains, and seas turned into giant tsunamis. This effect would be less the further into the northern or southern hemisphere you lived. But even here in Los Angeles, we're still moving about 850 miles an hour, faster than the speed of sound. Everything that relies on satellites, which need to maintain a constant position over Earth's surface, known as geostationary satellites, would stop working. Right now, these satellites orbit around Earth at the same speed that our planet is spinning, keeping its position over one spot. If the Earth suddenly stopped spinning, they'd keep moving and lose that position over a precisely chosen spot. That means different elements of communications, television, and weather monitoring systems would all go down. But let's say the Earth stops spinning more slowly, so we don't all get yeeted along the surface. Yeeted is actually a very professional science term, if you weren't aware. First off, it would change where the Earth's oceans hang out. Earth might look like a perfect sphere, but billions of years of rotation have made Earth just a little bit thicker in the middle. This oblate spheroid shape means sea level at the equator is about 13 miles higher than at the poles. Without the spin of the Earth, the water would flow to lower elevations in the North and South poles, leaving one enormous but mostly barren continent around Earth like a belt, with 2 oceans at the top and bottom of the planet. So all of Northern Europe, all of Canada and Russia, and even the top half of the United States would be completely submerged. But if all that wasn't bad enough, no more rotation would mean one day would last a whole year, which sounds nice if that falls on a weekend, but you wouldn't be able to enjoy it, since half the year you'd be shrouded in darkness of night, and half the year you'd be cooking in the sun. On the night side, lack of sun and cold temperatures would kill off most plants. On the day side, the scorching heat could reach 100 degrees Celsius, enough to kill most life and boil off any lakes and rivers. Scientists also think the rotation of Earth's core is the main driver of our planet's magnetic field. Without this bubble of protection, the surface would be bombarded by dangerous radiation, and the solar wind would eventually strip Earth of its atmosphere. While a sudden stop probably isn't in our future, we are slowing down. Gravitational drag from the moon means our Earth day gains an average of 1.8 milliseconds per century. So if you're worried about the Earth no longer spinning, relax. We've got 500 billion years before the moon brings us to a stop. And who knows where humanity will be by then? Maybe Mars, but that's a whole nother story. Life is full of ups and downs, and today we're using those for science. Take a look.
Gravity is one of the fundamental principles of the universe, affecting everything from how stars and galaxies form to why your phone falls on your face sometimes. All objects that have mass are attracted to or gravitate towards each other, and less mass means less gravity. If you were to take a stroll on Mars, you'd feel 1/3 as heavy as you do on Earth. Astronauts on the moon feel only 1/6 as heavy. But what if you wanted to feel free of gravity, but didn't want to leave Earth? Today, I'm teaming up with my Mission Unstoppable bestie, aerospace engineer Dr. Sydney Hamilton, to fly on G-Force One, a plane modified to simulate the weightlessness of space. Our guide on this adventure is Michelle Peters, research director for Zero Gravity Corporation.
I've always been curious about space. I've always been adventurous. So I just pursued my dreams, and now I'm here living them. It's amazing.
So what sort of research do you do on zero gravity flights?
We do like biomedical research. We do material science. We do robotics. So maybe if you have a solar panel that's going to open, You want to see how it's going to open in lunar gravity or in zero gravity.
Why might they want to do these experiments?
Well, a lot of universities that are doing research, some of their undergrad and grad students apply for NASA grants through what's called the Flight Opportunities Program. That's a wide range of experiments. It depends on what NASA's focus is.
The secret behind weightlessness comes from the plane traveling in a shape called a parabola. At the bottom of the parabola, the plane travels away from the Earth at a 45-degree angle. During this climb, we will experience 1.8 Gs, or almost twice the force of gravity on the ground. The pilots will reduce the thrust and adjust direction. This is when the weightlessness will begin. Inside the plane, our inertia will keep us traveling forward and up, while gravity will pull us down. Skilled pilots will make sure the plane exactly matches our trajectory and speed. And we're gonna do that 15 times. But enough talking about it. Let's experience it. To baby step our way into being astronauts, the pilot adjusts the angle of the parabola so that our first trip simulates the gravity on Mars. The first parabola was the most nerve-wracking. I didn't know what Martian gravity would feel like, and then all of a sudden, my body felt light and it was easy to bounce around the plane. Then they adjust the angle again. I felt even lighter when experiencing the moon's gravity, which made bouncing around the plane even more fun. As we travel up and down the parabola, Michelle is busy as the flight director, coordinating with the pilots, flight attendants, and guests to make sure everyone knows what's going on. The feeling of weightlessness. It's like nothing on Earth.
I can't believe I got to do that.
It's hard to describe to people how it feels to be in zero gravity.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much again, Michelle. That was
You are so welcome.
Awesome.
We'll see you next time, guys.
Yes, we will definitely be back again.
Very cool.
Coming back again.
Welcome back. Before we go, we have one last thing.
If you're interested in science or art, or the environment and engineering, or medicine and technology, there's so many more options that are attainable now.
If you like to dance, you could learn about physics. If you like to play video games, you can learn about computer science. Look into the science behind the stuff that you already like.
Don't give up. Don't let people tell you what you can or can't do. Lots of people have told me, no, you can't do this. It's too scary. It's too hard. And I said, you just watch me.
That's it for this week. Next time, we'll try to teach coding to roly-polies. They're so uninformed. It's like they're living under a rock. Bye. If you're watching this, you must have really liked the video. Make sure you follow and subscribe, and check out these other videos that are even better. No, really. I've seen this one over 100 times.